So today, we're going to pick up our story after the events of Easter had taken place. The disciples are trying to move on with their lives. They've gone back to their homes on the shore of the Sea of Galilee, back to their fishing boats, but they've had a bad night's fishing. They caught nothing. And then we discover that Jesus shows up, but isn't recognized in the dim pre-dawn light. He turns this failed fishing expedition into an enormous catch of fish. Fish everywhere. As the disciples come back excitedly to the shore, they realize it's Jesus standing on the beach. They hear a splash and Peter's over the side. He does put his clothes on first, as most fishermen in those days fished without anything except underwear. Much easier when you spend your day jumping in and out of the water. So, fully clothed, he swam to shore, leaving his friends to bring in the haul of fish. So, I want you to go in your imagination for a moment. Pretend you're in a boat approaching the beach on the Sea of Galilee with the disciples, and you see a fire. As your feet hit the stony shore of this lake, you smell the smoke from a fire. Jesus has been up early and he's prepared something, a fire made of charcoal. That's where I want to start, the charcoal. It may not seem important, but John has mentioned it for a reason. I'm not much of a barbecuer myself, but I have borrowed these chunks of charcoal. And we're going to just think a moment about it. Can you imagine a newly lit barbecue? Can you remember the smells? Maybe you've had one this weekend. Maybe we're going back to last year. Does it remind you of an event or a special time with family or friends? The sense of smell can do that. It can jog our memories. Just reflect for a moment. Now, one person sitting on the beach, the sight and the smell and the sound of burning charcoal would have brought back some interesting memories. Can you guess which of those disciples might have been disturbed by the smell of charcoal? You see, John wrote this account and he wanted us to notice something. The Greek word anthrachia is the word for charcoal. It's only found in one other place in the whole of the New Testament. It's found in John, chapter 18. Just listen for a moment. Simon Peter and another disciple followed Jesus. That other disciple was well known to the high priest. So he went with Jesus into the courtyard of the high priest's house. Peter stayed outside by the gates. Then the other disciple went back out, spoke to the girl, and brought Peter inside. The girl at the gate said to Peter, "Aren't you also one of the disciples of that man?" "No, I'm not," answered Peter. It was cold, so the servants and the guards had built a charcoal fire and were standing around it, warming themselves. So Peter went and stood with them. It's that same word. It's used for the courtyard fire where the servants of the high priest stood warming themselves during the chilly night of Jesus' trial. It was there that Peter denied Jesus 3 times. I wonder what crossed Peter's mind as he smelt the burning charcoal. Did he remember that night, not so many nights ago, when he had denied knowing Jesus? Now, I wonder if you too can remember times you should have spoken up. You kept silent when you should have said something to stand up for Jesus or your faith. But it's important to remember that we're not super Christians. We do make mistakes, that we bumble along trying our best, not always succeeding. Our faith does get watered down or complicated by what's happening in our daily lives. Aren't we all a bit like Peter? If you do feel a bit like Peter this morning, you're in very good company. And the good news is that Jesus is taking Peter's betrayal and doing something about it. Now, Jesus offered the disciples bread. Just pause for a moment. Imagine freshly baked bread. What a lovely smell, isn't it? It may bring back positive memories for you, maybe of going to the boulangerie when you're in holiday in France or whatever. But I wonder if that bread reminded Jesus' friends, Peter and the rest, of another meal, a meal when Jesus had held bread in his hands and confused them all by talking about his body being like bread. He told them his body was going to be broken for them. Confusing perhaps at the time, but I wonder, did it all begin to make more sense as they took the bread from Jesus' hand on that beach? Did they link it with the crucifixion? Did they remember Jesus saying, every time you eat bread, you will remember what I have done for you? The scars in his hands as he passed the bread may well have been a reminder to them too. Now, we live in a broken world, don't we? I defy you to watch the news for more than 2 minutes on TV to realise the mess that the world is in. But actually, if we're honest, we're broken people too. So the bread can remind us of the one who took all of the brokenness of ourselves and of the world so that he could make us whole again. And then the fish. Now, I thought about bringing a proper fish, but I decided that probably wasn't on. So this is my fish. Jesus had already got some fish that morning, and he was cooking them. The smell of cooked fish is nice, actually, isn't it? It's better than raw fish, in my view. Fish and chip shops smell good too, don't they? But Jesus' friends, I wonder if they remembered when Jesus had turned a couple of fish into enough to feed a whole crowd of people, 5,000. Jesus provided then what they needed. And Jesus has also said something to them too. He said when he first called them, he would teach them a new skill. Not fishing for fish, but fishing for people. Jesus would provide for them, and they were called to do that. God can turn the impossible into the possible. The fish is a reminder of that. And a reminder too that each of us is called to go out into the world and fish for Jesus. I wonder what went through Peter's mind when Jesus turned to him and suggested they go for a little walk. Oh no, I'm in big trouble, is one idea. But you know, Jesus was in the business of trying to help Peter, put him back together, if you like. So what he says, Peter, do you love me? He doesn't say, Peter, you've let me down, can you try harder? He doesn't say, do you promise never to do that again? He just asks, do you love me? And isn't that the most important question? Because it's not based on how good we are, on our performance, our ability to say the right thing at the right time, just as well for Peter, but just as well for you and me too. Jesus asked Peter 3 times, do you love me? 1 time for each time that Jesus denied Jesus around that charcoal fire in the courtyard. It wasn't a coincidence, I don't think, that Jesus chose the beach and another fire to show Peter he'd been forgiven, that the past was wiped clean. Jesus wanted Peter to be restored and renewed. Yes, he could have confronted Peter and asked him why, but he didn't. He wanted Peter to see the smoke, the charcoal, to remember and then to know that it was all right. Peter, I have called you, and you've given up so much for me. Come again and follow me. I want to teach you to fish for people. Remember that it was around a campfire like this that you failed, but now go feed my sheep. Jesus restores Peter and chooses him to care for his followers. His failure didn't cancel him out. He wasn't disregarded. He was given restoration, healing, and a new job. See, Jesus will heal our failings, and he will choose us too, because he has a job for each one of us. Great news and a challenge too. We are to love Jesus and care for his people, because actually we're all a bit like Peter. But Peter had great faith. Now, I sort of forgot to have a joke prepared today, and I know you will wait with great expectation for this happy event. The only one that comes to my mind is about fishing. There were 3 people out in a fishing boat. One was a priest of the Church of England, another was a Catholic, and another was a Jew. And after a while, one of them said, "Oh, I think I need to pop to the clubhouse, you know." So he got out of the boat and he walked across the water to the clubhouse. Wow, thought the Jewish man, this is very impressive. And then shortly afterwards, the priest also from the Church of England did the same thing. So the Jew thought, well, can't let these Christians do that. I also will be able to walk on water. I've got faith. So he said, okay, well, I'm going to go. And he stepped out and there was a mighty splash. And the priest said to the other guy, do you think we should have told him that there's stepping stones just under the surface of the water to the clubhouse from here? But actually, what we all need is we need the faith that helps us to walk on water, to know that Jesus will provide for us, that he's with us, he will sustain us, and if he calls us, he will always be faithful. God uses broken things. It takes broken soil to produce a crop, broken clouds to produce rain, broken grain to give bread. And so it is Peter, weeping bitterly, broken, who returns to greater power to serve than ever. I do hope and pray that Jesus will restore you if you need it and will give you another opportunity to serve him in whatever ways are appropriate for you. But you know, as I prepared for today, I was struck that the people of Ukraine belong to Jesus. They are his sheep. And we are called to feed his sheep like Peter, aren't we? Jesus is the shepherd for all his children. They all need love. And I think we need to remember that the people of the Ukraine, whether they're still in the Ukraine, whether they're refugees, whether they're even in our midst, do need our love and our support.